Hey everybody, thanks for spending some time with CCC Online. We've been talking about putting down deep roots in our faith, and we're continuing that series today. I hope this online service helps you take steps towards God. That's what CCC is all about. I hope this time is really helpful, and I hope it's just what you need today.
Come all you weary, come all you thirsty, come to the well that never runs dry. Drink of the water, come and thirst no more. Come all you sinners, come find His mercy. Come to the table, He will satisfy. Taste of His goodness, find what you're looking for. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. Bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting there with open arms, oh, with open arms. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well, I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved, God so loved the world. For God so loved the world that He gave us His one and only Son to save us. Whoever believes in Him will live forever. The power of hell forever defeated. Now it is well, I'm walking in freedom. For God so loved, God so loved the world. Bring all your failures, bring your addictions, come lay them down at the foot of the cross. Jesus is waiting, God so loved the world.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Some of you might remember a series of movies that starred Matt Damon, where the first one in that series, starts off with him floating down in the sea. And some fishermen, they end up pulling him out of the water and they bring Matt Damon's character onto their boat. And they see he's in really bad shape. I mean, he's unconscious, but he's alive, but they can tell he's really been through it. They see he's been shot and they end up beginning to treat him. And they treat his gunshot wound. They kind of revive him and they take care of him over a period of days, maybe even weeks. And he begins to get better and they're all out to sea while they're doing this. And they end up Eventually, when he gets well enough, they drop him off at a port in a city, at a dock in a place that he's never been to. I mean, at least he doesn't remember being there anyway. In fact, he doesn't remember much of anything. Matt Damon's character, he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who anybody else is either. He doesn't remember. But he ends up putting a few clues together, and these clues, they kind of lead him to a bank. And somehow he gets into a safety deposit box because, well, the people at the bank, they kind of remember him. Again, he doesn't remember anything. But he gets to this safety deposit box, and he opens up the safety deposit box, and inside is a stack of money, and there's a gun in there with some ammunition, and there's about a dozen passports, all with different names on them, but with his picture on each passport. Do you remember the name of that first movie? Yeah, it's The Bourne Identity. It's about a guy who's trying to figure out who he is. I loved those movies. I mean, they were exciting, not only because of all the action, but you were trying to figure out the puzzle of who Matt Damon's character was along with him. And you were hoping he'd figure out his identity. Which brings us to our focus for today. We've been in this series called Rooted, where we're talking about the things we've got to have integrated into our life if we're going to have the kind of faith that's stable and steady, that's built on something solid, that's going to last. And today, we want to talk about having an identity that won't let you down or won't disappoint you. One worth building your life on. See, everybody needs an identity. We all need a sense of self and a sense of worth that can kind of handle the ups and downs of life and the ups and downs of our own performance. We can't live without that. It's essential. And in a lot of ways, identity is at the core of our culture. Like every day, in every way, our culture is saying things like, be true to yourself and love yourself and value yourself, those kinds of things. But even though our culture is almost obsessed with identity, every culture has to give its members a way of forming an identity. Every culture does this. And it's worth asking, exactly how does our culture help to form our identity? And how is it different than other cultures do it? And what does Christianity have to offer? Well, let's start this way by talking about the two basic kinds of identities that are out there. Charles Taylor is a Canadian philosopher. He wrote a book called Sources of the Self. And what he does is he traces the history of several centuries in which the Western world that we move from what we might call a traditional identity, we move from there to today's modern identity. So traditional identity, modern identity. Our culture, it offers us a modern identity. We've kind of shed the traditional identity. But in most of the rest of the world, like non-Western world, traditional identity is still the way those cultures give people a sense of self or worth. So let's spend a bit of time understanding this. Like big picture, think of it this way. Traditional identity is outside in. Modern identity is inside out. All right, so traditional identity works like this. You go outside yourself to find the truth. Like the truth that, that could be God, it could be family, it could be some moral tradition. Like all cultures that offer a traditional identity say, first you go outside to find the truth, and then you come inside and you kind of realign your life and your feelings to fit the truth. So for example, if you say, the truth is you shouldn't commit adultery, but inside you feel like, I would like to commit adultery. Well, there's a lot of pressure not to, and a lot of avenues and reasons that you don't. And so you align your feelings with the truth. So it's outside in. Go out to find the truth, come in to rearrange your life. And your self-worth is given to you usually by your family or your community. Like your self-worth is bestowed on you if your family sees you putting off your own self-interests and desires for the greater good. And then they call you, an honorable person or a good person, and you get a lot of your self-worth affirmed there from them. So again, go out to get the truth, come in to align your life with it, and then your community affirms you and bestows honor and self-worth on you. Now, modern identity is exactly the opposite. You first go inside and you decide who you want to be. You go inside to find the truth. You go inside to find out what's right or wrong. And then you come outside and you expect, or maybe even demand, that everyone else adapt their feelings to you and accommodate their feelings to you and your identity and who you've determined you are. And in the modern identity, nobody has the right to tell you your self-worth. No one, we might say, is your validator except for you. Only you can decide who you are. Only you can decide what's right and wrong for you. So you don't give your family or your community or anybody else the right to tell you who you are. You validate yourself. All right. So there they are. The traditional identity, outside in, truth out there, adapt my feelings to it. My community tells me the person that I have self-worth. Modern identity, inside out. I go inside to find the truth. I come outside and require everyone accommodate me, and then I validate myself. And again, Taylor says that we've moved from a traditional identity to a modern identity. A great place to see this on display is in what was an incredibly popular movie that came out in 2013, almost 10 years ago, called Frozen. I have a feeling an awful lot of you saw that movie. And what we see in the movie Frozen is someone moving from a traditional to a modern identity, and it's right before our eyes. The signature song, you probably know it, it's sung by Elsa. It's called Let It Go. And listen to how the song starts. In the beginning, she says, don't let them in, don't let them see, be the good girl you always have to be, conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Now what that is, it's a traditional identity. And it is, by the way, depicted in a pretty negative way. But what we're doing is we're getting a traditional identity there. Don't let them in, don't let them see, be the good girl you have to be. But then suddenly she sings, I've got to see what I can do, test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. So right there, she moves from a traditional identity to a modern identity right before us. And in case we didn't get the picture, in case we didn't catch it, there's a dazzling costume change to make sure we understand. So out comes the hair and all of that, But we see what's going on. Let it go means find what's inside. Don't hold it back anymore and express it. And here's the deal. In every single movie, practically every single day, every social media platform, everything today is saying that the traditional identity is terrible and the modern identity is the way you want to go. Now, the problem is that neither of these identities are very stable. Like, there are problems with both of them. I mean, in the traditional identity, if you let your family or your community down, well, they can be pretty hard on you. They can punish you. It can be brutal. And sometimes you can never live that down. The traditional identity, it can kind of suffocate you, or it can lead to exploitation, sometimes abuse. What matters in the traditional identity is what's out there, and what's out there has all the power. It seems like there's no voice here. Like we're just a cog in the machine, or as the philosophers Pink Floyd once sang, all in all, you're just another brick in the wall. And there are significant problems with the modern identity too. Mainly, the modern identity, well, it's ridiculously fragile. See, one of the assumptions is you can't let anybody else tell you who you are. You can't let anybody else validate you or judge your worth. Only you can. But that's not possible because, well, we're irreducibly relational creatures. We were talking about this in week 1 of the Bible Made Possible this past Tuesday. But we cannot simply say, hey, everybody else in the world may think I'm terrible, but I don't care. I'm happy. I think I'm wonderful, so I'm good. We're just not going to be able to do that. If we're irreducibly relational creatures, we need people to validate us. And this is part of what it means to be a person. We are fundamentally relational beings. And if we hold on and we say, only I can validate myself, well, the problem with that is that nobody knows your flaws more than you do. Like nobody else knows how far short you're falling from your standards, which means you can't validate yourself. You desperately need other people. It's kind of contradictory to the way that we're made, what's built into the human DNA. The modern identity is fragile because we're so needy. We need so much affirmation, and we could just never get enough. It's one of the reasons we have the social media meltdowns that we end up getting, because You can't just disagree with someone, because the idea is by disagreeing with people, you're actually attacking their identity. But it's also fragile. The modern identity is fragile because it puts so much emphasis on romantic relationships. It actually leads to, in some ways, addiction to sex and romance, because we're not looking outside of ourselves for any sort of truth anymore. Like, we're not looking to God in the modern identity. There's no sense of transcendence. We've kind of pushed God out, or not looking to him, or we don't believe in him. So we end up looking somewhere else for purpose and meaning and value, for, validation. And we end up making an idol of romance. Ernest Becker, who was an atheist, by the way, in the 1970s, he wrote a book called The Denial of Death, won a Pulitzer Prize. And in it, he talks about apocalyptic romance. And here's what he writes. Now that we don't have God to get our identity from, we try to get our identity from a lover. The self-glorification that we now need to achieve in our innermost being, we now look for in our love partner. What is it we want when we elevate the love partner to this position, he writes. We want the love partner to rid us of our faults. We want to be justified. We want to get rid of our feeling of nothingness. We want to know our existence has not been in vain. We want redemption from our love partner, nothing less. Needless to say, he says, no human being can give you this. And you see what he's saying? We want the love partner to play the role of validator. So many have pushed God out of the picture, or just aren't looking for him. And we then seek out a love partner and expect them to give us what God used to. But a lover can't give you what people used to look for God for, because a lover's fallible. A lover is finite. They won't always be there. You're giving that romantic relationship way too much say over you. You see how fragile this is? We desperately need someone to validate us, even though we say, no, we're validating ourselves. Well, it just doesn't hold up, and it doesn't work. It's fragile. See, both these ways society is giving us an identity, traditional identity, modern identity, they're seriously flawed. Traditional people who are looking outside in and are trying to satisfy their family, maybe they're trying to satisfy their parents or their community, and modern people who are looking inside out and trying to be true to themselves, they're both trying to validate themselves. They're trying to existentially justify themselves. And so they're performing. They're both trying to get you to earn it, to validate yourself, to justify your own existence. So there's an enormous amount of pressure, an enormous amount. And it ends up being pretty crushing to us, because what all this is doing, it's just making us perform. And if you're performing well this week, like, you got a bit of confidence. If you're not performing well, then you feel kind of down in the dumps. Is there another way? Is there another way? Absolutely. See, the Christian faith, Christianity, being a follower of Jesus, it gives you the only identity that's received, not achieved. Don't miss this. It's received, not achieved. The Christian identity is unique because of this. It's unique because of the basis for this. So check it out. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 5:21, it says this, God made him, meaning Jesus, God made him sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Now, when the Bible says there, God made Jesus sin, like on the cross, he made Jesus sin, that doesn't mean God made him sinful. It doesn't mean Jesus became nasty and awful and evil. No, it means Jesus was treated as if he had done everything we had done. One translation put it this way, God put on him the wrong who never did anything wrong. So Jesus, he took the punishment and he paid the debt. So when it says God made him sin, God put on him the wrong, it means that he was treated as if he had done everything we had done. God made him sin who knew no sin, and then that second part there, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And what that means is when you say, hey, God, forgive me and accept me, not because of anything I've done, but because of what Jesus has done, at that moment, we become the righteousness of God to him. So just as Jesus did not become sinful, but was treated as if he had done everything we'd done, so we don't automatically become perfect, like not at all. It just means that when you believe and you trust in Jesus, God treats you as if you've done everything Jesus has done. You see? And this is astounding. Like there's no other culture, there's no other faith, there's no other religion that gives you an identity based on that. God's regard of you, Jesus' regard of you, cannot go up or down depending on your performance. See, it's got this unique basis because it's got this unique source. The traditional identity says your family or your community tells you who you are and validates you. The modern identity says you tell you who you are. You validate yourself. But in the Christian identity, God tells you who you are. He's the one who validates you. You are his. You belong to him. According to the Bible, when you believe in and are found in Jesus Christ, God, whose opinion is the only one who really counts, he looks at you and he finds you more precious than all the precious jewels that lie beneath the earth. To the degree that that sinks in, to that degree, you have the most solid possible identity there is. See, both traditional and modern identity is based on performance, which means if you're doing okay, then maybe you got a little confidence. But if you got all that confidence, you may have a tendency toward no humility. You can get arrogant. If you're not doing okay, you can have humility, but no confidence. But you see, because the Christian identity is received, not achieved, and it's the gift of grace, you actually don't deserve it, but you get it. It humbles you and it also lifts you at the same time. And therefore, there's a boldness and humility together that happens in a Christian identity that's just unique because its basis and its source is so different. The truth is, the validation we need, it's completely based on performance, but it's not based on your performance. It's based on his. It's based on Jesus' performance. And it is given to you. It's given to us. In the Bible, there's this example where Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, he's told by Jesus, hey, Peter, he said, you're going to deny me 3 times before this night is up. Like, Peter, you're a coward. You're going to deny me. And Peter says, no, I'm not. There's no way. I'm the bravest of the disciples. I'm like, even if everyone else abandons you, I'm not going to abandon you. And of course, what happens? I mean, some of you know, Peter went on to deny Jesus 3 times. So we got to ask the question about how Peter could have been that far off in regard to who he was. See, Peter looked into his heart and saw nothing but bravery when actually there was cowardice there. How did he miss it that big? Well, it's because Peter's identity was based not on Jesus' love for him, at least not at this point, but on his love for Jesus. In other words, he says, I love you more than all the others. So even though he was close to Jesus, he actually had an identity based on his own performance. Again, at this point in time, this is how we see Peter. At that time, Peter says, the reason I feel good about myself is because, well, I'm the most faithful and brave of all the disciples. Like, even if all fall away, I'm not going to. But it's not about Peter's love for Jesus at all. It's about Jesus' love for Peter. It's received, not achieved. And those are 2 completely different ways to root your life. You know, the Bible tells us about another time in Luke 10 where Jesus sends out his disciples to, kind of sends them on a mission to heal. And they go out and they start healing people of all their diseases. And, you know, Jesus gives them the power to do just that. And in the process, they actually start casting out demons. It's a remarkable scene. And the disciples, they're pretty amazed by it all. And so they come back and Jesus asks them, he says like, well, how was it? How'd it go, fellas? And they say, good night. Even the demons are subject to our name. So they're just filled with all this joy about this power that they've got. And Jesus looks at them and he says, check this out. He says, do not rejoice that the demons submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. To say your names are written in heaven means you don't have to worry about ever going to heaven. You've already got a place there. See, most faiths, most religions say, hey, you're saved by your good works, which means you don't know whether you're going to heaven until the end of your life because you got to earn it. But Christianity says, Jesus says, no. Once you become a Christian, well, that's guaranteed. It's promised. It's a done deal. And therefore, Jesus says, why are you rejoicing over the fact that you've had a good day? Why are you rejoicing over the fact that you got this power? Like tomorrow you might have a bad day. And then how are you going to feel? He says, no, don't rejoice in that. Rejoice, not that the demons listen to you. Rejoice not in your success. Rejoice not in your power. Rejoice that your name is written in heaven. He's saying you got to stop, fellas. You got to keep your heart from resting in other things when you've got this. You've been given this. You've been given everything. You already have this. Rejoice in my regard for you, he says, not in your performance. And this takes a long, long time to sort through. And what happens is we rejoice in so many other things. We root ourselves in so many other places. We root ourselves in the family we come from, so we rejoice there. Or we root ourselves in our bank accounts, so we rejoice there. Or we root ourselves in our role as, a parent or a spouse. Or we root ourselves in our appearance, or in our IQ, or in our grades, or in our sexuality, or in the letters behind our name or our signature. We go to all these other places to validate ourselves, which rejoices in our performance, just like the disciples. And our lives, as a result, they just go up and down. They're just so unstable. It's performative. And all the while, Jesus is there saying, listen, root yourself in my regard of you and what I've done for you and what I'm offering to you and what in so many cases I've already given to you. Let how I see you and what I've given you dominate you. And when you do, like what happens when we do that is all the other things, all those other roles, all those other parts of our lives, they end up being appropriately placed. When you're a Christian first, when you identify as one who belongs to Jesus Christ first, when being a Christian is the most fundamental layer of your identity, when your self-worth, you see, it's based more in what Jesus says about you than anything else, well, what happens is it relativizes all those other things. It doesn't change them. It doesn't make them go away. Like you're still a dad, you're still a mom, you're still an athlete, you're still a student, whatever. But it supersedes all those other aspects of who you are. It orders them. Check out how this came to be for the Apostle Paul. Like he wrote this to the church at Philippi and actually to us in the Bible in Philippians 3. He writes this, you know my pedigree, a legitimate birth, circumcised on the 8th day, an Israelite from the elite tribe of Benjamin, a strict and devout adherent to God's law, a fiery defender of the purity of my religion, even to the point of persecuting the church, a meticulous observer of everything set down in God's law book. All right, so in these first few verses here, he's talking about his achievements. He's talking about things like, his sexuality, his national identity, his job, his morality, even his religion there. And what we see here is he's doing pretty well. Like he's winning. Everything that culture says is important, he's got. But he's come to a point where he says this about all that. Now you think about this. He goes on and he writes, the very credentials people are waving around as something special, I'm tearing up and throwing out with the trash along with everything else I used to take credit for. And why, he asks? Because of Christ. Yes, all the things I once thought were so important are gone from my life. Compared to the high privilege of knowing Christ Jesus as my master firsthand, everything I once thought I had going for me is insignificant. I've dumped it all in the trash so that I can embrace Christ and be embraced by him. I didn't want some petty, inferior brand of righteousness that comes from keeping a list of rules when I could get the robust kind that comes from trusting Christ, God's righteousness. You see what he said there? He's receiving this. He's not achieving this. He says, I gave up all that inferior stuff. He's looking elsewhere for his identity so he could know Christ personally. experience his resurrection power, be a partner in his suffering, and go all the way with him to death itself. If there's any way to get in on the resurrection from the dead, I wanted to do it too. I mean, this is incredible what he concludes here, what he comes to, how he's kind of living his life and rooting his life. And the more this perspective gets in us, gang, the more we are rooted in a Christ-centered identity based on receiving what Jesus did for us, not achieving however we're trying to validate ourselves, then the more stable and steady our life will be. It orders everything properly, and it's the only identity that won't let you down. And Paul discovered it. So how do we get there? Like, how do we discover this? Well, Paul tells us at the end there. Check it out. I'm not saying that I have all this together, that I have it made, but I'm well on my way. And then I love this phrase, reaching out for Christ, who has so wondrously reached out for me. And he says, friends, don't get me wrong. By no means do I count myself an expert on all of this, but I got my eye on the goal where God is beckoning us onward, which is Jesus. I'm off and running, and I'm not turning back. Paul says, I'm reaching out to Jesus Christ. And that's how we get there. We reach out to Jesus, who has so wondrously reached out for us. We pursue him. We chase him. We worship him. We obey him. We run after him relentlessly. A Christ-centered identity. That could be the very thing that transforms your entire life.
We're going to celebrate communion, so go ahead and get some bread and juice. The bread reminds us that Jesus gave up his body for us, and the juice reminds us that his blood was spilled. We eat the bread and drink the juice to remember in a tangible way that God has shown us his grace and forgiven us, and we've been made right with God because Jesus sacrificed himself. It's all because of what Jesus has done for us. Communion is about remembering Jesus because he is the one. He loved us first, and we honor that and celebrate the mercy we receive because of him. Let's celebrate communion now.
God of Abraham, you're the God of covenant, of faithful promises. And time again, you have proven you do just what you say. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. God, from age to age, Though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down.
I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. He'll never let me down. Oh, great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me.
Thanks again for tuning in and spending some time with CCC Online. If you're looking for more information about CCC, head over to communitycc.net. While you're there, click the Plan a Visit button, and you can get a great feel for what in-person services are like. It would be great to see you at an in-person service. If you like this online service, you'll love in-person. It will probably be the highlight of your week. If you'd like to partner with CCC financially and contribute towards helping people find their way back to God, just click the Give tab at communitycc.net, or you can text CCC White Marsh to the number on your screen. Your generosity and support are making a huge difference and are very much appreciated. So thank you for entrusting CCC with your resources. If you're watching this on Sunday morning, you're in luck, because today is Food Truck Sunday at CCC. There's a bunch of food trucks out back, a big old tent. Come on out and say hi. I'd love to see you there. I'm glad you spent some time with CCC Online today. See you back here next week for the next installment of this Rooted series. Take care, everybody.